So, this is supposed to be a vanilla dream cake. Haven't tried this recipe. We're trying it together. The picture looks moist. So, it is right before Jonathan's birthday party. I'm in the middle of doing a bunch of laundry, trying to clean up the laundry room, get the house organized, get cakes made, tidy up, dishes, all that fun stuff. Saturday is Jonathan's birthday party with his friends from school and stuff. And then Sunday, we're celebrating Jonathan and Jordanna's birthday with our family members. I figured this would be a great time and a fun time to show you guys some cake recipes. We're doing a chocolate layer, we're doing a vanilla layer, and we're doing a strawberry layer. So there is 3 different sections to the cake. So we're doing 3 different flavors of cake, because like, why not, right? So stay tuned. We're gonna do all the cakes. So as always, when we do recipes like this, I will link the recipes in the description that I'm using. I always find everything on Pinterest. So we always make sure there's nothing in the oven because I make yogurt and sometimes I forget about it, and sometimes we leave it in the oven, turn it on, and we bake the yogurt. It calls for 2 9-inch circular pans, and the cake design we're going for is not circular, like the bottom layer is a rectangle. I'm going to grease up 2 of my 9x13 pans, and then we might have to make this twice in order to fill both the pans to the right height to get all this figured out. So anyway, and the way I grease my pans, which I need more wax paper, is I use wax paper, and I take my butter and I just kind of like form this around my fingers like that, and then I just take globs of butter and you just smush it around. Pans are greased. I am going to keep a hold of this because I don't know how much more wax paper I have, so I'm just going to put it in the butter dish for the next cakes that we do. I have 2 sets of measuring cups so that we can do wet and dry. Calls for 1 cup of milk, half a cup of oil. It doesn't specify, but I'm using vegetable oil. And I'm not putting my ingredients away in case we need to do like a second batch of this. So it calls for 2 eggs and 2 teaspoons of vanilla. I guesstimate that because I really like the vanilla flavor, so I don't care if there's extra. So now we're gonna put the sifter in. 2 cups of flour. Let's just give this a quick little whisk. 2 cups of sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda, 3/4 of a cup of cocoa powder. Last but not least, we have 1 cup of boiling water. So I'm gonna mix this up a little bit while that just reboils. It was already hot, but we'll just make sure it's extra hot. Almost forgot the salt. It is a teaspoon of salt. I always just run through the ingredients before I put it into the pan, and this is why. All right, so that was 1 cup of boiling water. All right, so we're just whisking till smooth. Tap the extra off. All right, we're gonna have to do it again. We're gonna have to do 2. All right, and then to get the bubbles out, smack it. So we will throw this in while we make the other one, just to give this a head start. We're baking it for 30 to 35 minutes, but that was in the circular pans. So we'll still bake it for 30. We'll see where it's at. All right, let's start from the top. I've never made this recipe before. I've made a recipe that's kind of like this, and I like the way that this recipe is done, where you pour the boiling water in at the end and it makes a really nice, like, moist chocolate cake. I don't normally like chocolate cakes, but the one that I made years ago that you pour the boiling water in at the end was just so yummy. So I really like recipes that are like that, which this one's like that, because I can't find that other recipe anywhere. We put the second cake in when there was 20 minutes left on the first cake, so we know when the first cake is done, we still have 10 more minutes for the second cake. And we are going to switch them positions in a little bit. Okay. So, anyways, we'll be back. We have 1:22 on the first cake, and then we have 10 minutes after that on the second cake. I did switch them halfway through. I didn't think about it, but what I would do for you, not me, because obviously it's too late for me, but it isn't for you. So what you should do is, when you are putting 2 cakes in an oven, you kind of put it at, like, I don't really know how to explain this well, but you kind of like stagger them around the middle of the oven. So you have one rack that's just above the middle and one rack that's just below the middle. So they're both kind of in the middle of the oven together, if that makes sense. So maybe like 1/3 and 2/3 of the oven. I don't know. Anyway, if that makes sense. I hope it makes sense to you. It makes sense in my head though. Let's take that out. So I tried to explain this one other time we were baking something together. To test to see if your stuff is done, you shove a toothpick in the highest point. If it comes out like wet batter, it's not done. That has, let's see if you can see it. It has a little bit of crumbs on it, but when you look at the crumbs, they're actually dry. It's not like sticking your toothpick into like the bowl of wet batter. Just testing a couple other areas. No. That's just delicious. All right, we're gonna put this on the oven. We're gonna let it rest for 10 minutes. And we put the timer on for 9 minutes for the other cake. Anyways, we're skipping ahead to the strawberry so that way we can use the round cake pans and get them going. And then once these cake pans are freed up, I think I only really need one of them, but we'll see. Maybe we'll just make 2, and if we don't need both, we'll freeze one just to have some cakes ready. But anyway, we're gonna skip ahead to the strawberry cakes now. So we need to make a strawberry puree for the strawberry cake. I probably have all the ingredients except for the cold butter and the red food coloring out. So to make 3/4 of a cup of strawberry puree, which is what we need for one recipe of this cake, and since we're making, we've got to think about this now. So we're making 4 batches of this cake. So we need to basically do our strawberry puree times 4. So since we're using a big measuring cup food processor thing, I think we can probably get all of it in. We'll see. But let's worry about one batch at a time, so that way we don't overwhelm ourselves. You need 12 strawberries to make the strawberry puree. for every 12 strawberries. So for every batch, we're putting 2 tablespoons of sugar in. This isn't a lot of strawberries in here, so I am going to do 12 more in there. Since we're doing 2 batches, if you're doing 1, stick with 12. All right, so this is a 9-cup food processor, and I would only probably stuff a double batch of puree in there, which is 24 strawberries, which means we need 4 tablespoons of sugar. If you have a stand mixer, this recipe is much easier with a stand mixer. I don't feel like going and getting that out from behind the basement door right now, so we're gonna do this the hard way. With good old-fashioned elbow grease. All right, but we're gonna wait the 30 seconds to get the other cake out. And we'll flip this cake. Some of that cake got stuck.
Okay, good.
So now we just get to eat it.
You get them eat.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even though we just made the cake in the oven and all that jazz, you still want to check and make sure that every cake you have made is fully cooked. Nothing on there except for 1 crumb at the top. So that cake is good to go. Oh yeah, that is clean. So we'll let that rest for 10 or so minutes, maybe a little longer, maybe it won't get as stuck. That is so good. So we made the strawberry puree. We did a double batch. We're gonna grease up these circular pans, but we're gonna grease them a lot more than we did before, just to make sure they don't all stick. Obviously, if you have like baking spray or cooking spray, you can use that. Yes, we forgot to flour it. That was our problem.
I didn't properly explain how to actually grease a pan properly. So all you're doing is taking butter. The easiest thing is to use wax paper, and as I showed you, just wrap it around your fingers so that way you can just grab the butter with your fingers, and you're just gonna smother the pan in butter. All edges that the cake is going to touch should be coated in butter, and just try to do as best a job as you can to coat all of the surface with butter, because then you're going to put flour on it. And what I do is I just kind of shake the flour around the bottom of the pan, and then I just kind of pat the pan and turn it, whether it is a rectangle or circle or anything like that. You just kind of pat the pan to get it to move the flour around, and the flour is just going to stick to the butter, and it's going to, when the batter goes into the pan, then it just stops it from sticking to the pan the way that one chocolate cake did stick to the pan. So you're just going to butter it, put flour on top of the butter. The flour is going to stick to the butter and basically create like a protective layer between the cake and the pan. And when it comes out of the oven, the cake just does not stick to the pan.
So we are using 1.5 cups of cake, or well, I think it's cake and pastry flour. Yeah. So 1.5 cups of cake flour, and then it'll be 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Sorry, I just had to review and make sure I did do 1.5 cups of cake flour. So anyway, now we need 1 3/4 cups of sugar. And then we need 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder and a teaspoon of salt. Okay, we're gonna whisk this together and then get the cold butter in. All right, we need a cup of cold butter. Well, what we're gonna do is cut up the cup. So essentially you want this to look like coarse breadcrumbs, but I made this the other day because I wanted to make sure it tasted good before serving it to people, and I made this into cupcakes, and this is the way I did it. I did not use a mixer then. I was just hand doing it with a wooden spoon, beating the crap out of the butter into the flour, or at least the dry ingredients, because it's not just flour. And you just want to make sure there's little chunks. I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't perfect about it. So there were like big chunks of butter and stuff. Not huge chunks, just bigger chunks. And it was all fine. So, you know, there are times that baking is an exact science. But I feel like a lot of cakes have like room for error. So I'm not saying all cakes, because there are definitely some delicate cakes, but this cake, I was not perfect about it, and it turned out just fine. Actually, it was delicious. The recipe ended up making 24 cupcakes. So I went and pawned a bunch of them off on the neighbors so that I wasn't eating them all, because they were delicious. So I'm going to show you this up close just to see if we can get... So when you see the consistency of flour, it's very fine. But when you're beating the butter into the flour, you'll basically notice that the like grains of flour just get bigger. So again, coarse breadcrumbs. And that's what you're looking for. And that's where I stopped pounding it. You'll see there's some bigger butter chunks, but it works out fine, trust me. You know, the biggest chunk of butter that I would leave, I don't even know, would be like this. So if you're gonna leave a chunk of butter, that's the chunk that I would leave. But anyway, so we're done this part. We beat the crap out of it. So now what we're supposed to do, so we need 4 eggs, 3/4 cup of milk. I did this all in here. They say to like mix all the wet ingredients together. I never do that. I'm going for less dishes. We're a family of 6. We make enough dishes. So 4 large eggs. We need milk, which is 3/4 cup. We need 3/4 cup of our strawberry puree and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And then remember, I made a double batch of this. And even when I made single batches of it, I still measured it out. And actually, when I made it the other day, I actually used a cup of the strawberry puree. And I really liked the flavor of that. And it's just because I had added extra strawberries. So we're putting a cup in. You really wouldn't think that the food coloring would matter that much. I didn't think so, but the other day when I made it, and I was like, oh, we're putting strawberry puree in the cake, it's gonna come out with like a pinky color. Why would I think that? I have no idea. It didn't. It comes out like a normal looking cake color, and I was super upset because this cake was for Dana's first birthday, and she's my first girl, and I wanted to make a dang pink cake. So that's why we're making more cakes today. So if you want a pink cake, even though you're using a strawberry puree, add the food coloring. So to make it pink, which is what I did yesterday, where'd it go? We're putting 15 drops of food coloring. Then we're gonna beat the eggs and then mix it all together. So this is how pink it is. It's about as pink as I am. That's after 15 drops. So if you want it pinker, add the extra 5. So There's no dry flour on the bottom of the bowl or anything, so we're gonna go ahead and we are going to pour this in and start our second batch because we need 4 cakes. All right, so you will see some like white chunks in there, but that's the butter, so don't panic. All right, it says to bake it for 35 to 40 minutes, so. Round 2. Success! No cracks, no missing pieces. Why are you eating a potato? Okay, no kidding, that doesn't taste the best. You know what? You do you, girl. I was just thinking you could probably use a pastry blender for this, because this is essentially what you do with pastry is you cut the butter in. You could probably do that. My pastry blender has broken handles and it springs open and it scares the crap out of me. Reminds me of a Jack-in-the-Box, so I don't use it, which is why I was using the knife earlier, actually, because you can also just use 2 butter knives to act like a pastry blender. We're washing that spoon, don't worry, but I don't care how old you are, licking the spoon is always fun. The 2 that are in the oven have about 13 minutes left, so I'm just gonna let them finish, throw these 2 in, and while we're waiting, I'm going to clean up this side of the kitchen, and that way basically when we put the other, we're going to wash everything, and so that way when we put the next 2 cakes in, we can start the vanilla, and that way all the cakes are going to be baked. All right guys, hear that? First round of strawberry cakes are done. So I already pulled one out and then I was like, oh yeah, we better do this together. So that's what we have right now. And it's dry, it's not wet batter, so we're good to go. We're gonna swap them out. So that was 35 minutes on my oven. Everyone's ovens are going to be different, so always check. Now on to the vanilla cake. All right, starting out, we need 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of baking soda. They are whisking dry ingredients. This one's different. I've never seen this before. It says in a medium saucepan, but this is like my gravy sauce thing. So I have 2 cups of water in here. And I think we're bringing that to a boil over medium-high heat. I'm just putting it on high right now so we can get it going because I didn't know we were doing this. And we're going to put the sugar in there, dissolve the sugar in there, 2 cups of sugar. And then we're gonna take it off the heat and stir the butter in until it gets melted. Then we have to let it cool completely, which is like 20 minutes. And it says 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter. I only have salted butter, so. We also need about half a teaspoon of salt in here. So 6 tablespoons is in between a 1/4 cup and a 1/2 cup. These are bricks of butter in Canada. So what you do is you cut 1/2 cup right there, and then you just cut a line down the middle there. It also says you need a vanilla bean scraped, and we ain't doing that, so we're just gonna put more vanilla extract on top of the tablespoon it calls for.
Okay, so go like this.
So the liquid, when you melt the sugar and dissolve the sugar into water, let's see if you can see. It's clear liquid. It just looks like water now. We will stir in the butter and let it melt. All right, let's watch the butter melt. All right, so we're gonna put that into the fridge, let it cool down. All right. So while that cools down and the other pans, cakes, whatever they're called, the other cakes are finishing baking, because it's about 20 minutes, so it actually worked out pretty well. I'm going to tidy up, so that way we just have the last few items to put in there, and I'm going to get the cake pan greased and floured. So just a tip, you don't want to leave the cakes in the pans too long, because they will start to sweat on the outside and then they'll get like soggy. So don't leave them in the pans too long. I mean, I left those in for probably like 20-25 minutes, which is like 10-15 minutes, you know. So they were starting to get a little moisture on the outside, so that's what reminded me to tell you. So our broken cake, just so we can see context, is, just gonna hold on to it so it doesn't fall. It's missing a fair size of the cake, and with these cakes being this thick, I don't think that we need like 2 full layers, maybe. I don't know. We'll look at the picture and figure it out though. But it is completely cooled, so I am going to put it on the cutting board, and then I will be leaving them down here because we're going to ice them tomorrow. So I do have another tip I want to share with you. Because I was using both of the square bake pans, I couldn't do this, but I will show you with the vanilla, since we're only baking 1 vanilla cake. I can show you what that little tip is, in case I forget to tell you when I'm doing it though. And the same with the round cakes. Again, I was using all the pans, so I couldn't do it. But what you can do, so after you bake a cake, you'll kind of notice that the top is kind of domed. And what you can do is you can take a pan that's basically the same size as the pan that like your cake is in, and just after it comes out of the oven, make sure it's obviously like non-stick and all that stuff, but you can actually push it down and like flatten the dome part of the cake, just to get it more flat, because a lot of people will cut the top off and that's just wasted cake. And I mean, like, if we're gonna go through all the trouble of baking cake and eating the cake, you don't want to waste the cake. So we have a few options. Flatten the top of the cake using another cake pan, which is what I'm going to do with the vanilla cake. I'm going to grab the other cake pan and just smush it down. The other option, which is what I usually do, is just throw some icing in the bits that aren't even. We're not professional cake makers. We're making cake for our family and the kids that come to our house for birthday parties. And if those cakes aren't good enough for those kids, don't come then. Don't eat the freaking cake. So you can do two things. If you're not going to flatten your cake, you don't care about the dome, all that stuff. If you do want a flat surface, the top part of the cake, put it on the bottom, because the bottom of your pan is flat. So that'll give you a flat surface, and you only have to fill in the edges of your cake along the bottom of whatever platform your cake is going to be on. That's option one. Option two, if you're doing a layer cake, you know, you want the flat bottom. So you put your cake facing the proper way up, and then just fill in the icing around the middle of the cake, because who doesn't like extra icing in there? So that's just kind of like my go-to, you know. You can also just put the tops together and then just fill in all that icing in your layers. So I don't know, that's kind of my best thought, is because I like a lot of icing, so don't waste your cake. Another thing too that I just kind of thought of, if you are going to cut the top off your cake, you could just kind of use it for cake pops. So like cut the tops off your cake to make them all flat and pretty and whatnot, and then you can just take those cake pieces and put it into a blender or food processor and get breadcrumbs, like cake breadcrumbs, basically cake crumbs, and then you can mix it with icing and make your own cake pops. So that's another thing that you could do with it, so it's not wasted, because like, why throw the cake out? Or you could just eat it. You could just eat the part you cut off. So that's another one. Don't waste it. All right, that's cooling down nicely, but I would suggest to go in there periodically and stir it, because a nice layer of butter formed on there, and then I think it prevented it from cooling down. If it had room in the freezer, I'd just throw it in there. Perfect. I don't know if that's cool completely, but honestly at this point, like, well, we're gonna break the eggs in another bowl and we're gonna add the hot liquid slowly to kind of heat the eggs up, but make sure we don't end up with scrambled eggs. This would be a great night to
Hi, Mama.
hi, cook a freezer meal, but we don't have any. So I'm gonna get my crap together, and over the May long weekend, we are going to make a crap ton of freezer meals, because I know more days like this are gonna come up. We have a lot of stuff to do this summer in the garden, and preserving things come like harvest time. So I think that just preparing for it now, having a bunch of meals ready in the freezer, is going to be beneficial, because it is almost 6:30. And I mean, the two older boys are playing outside with their friend. They don't really care. They haven't come in saying they're hungry yet, but the two younger ones are most definitely hungry. I'm sure Josh is hungry. I'm making some hot dogs right now to tide the younger two over. But yeah, a night like tonight is a freezer meal to just pop in the oven and cook. Although we are using our oven for cakes, so. Two tablespoons of vegetable oil. Now it calls for 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract and a vanilla bean scraped out. We don't have vanilla beans, so we're just gonna do 2 tablespoons of vanilla extract, because basically the vanilla bean is just very potent vanilla flavoring. So, and then the 2 eggs. So again, I'm just gonna mix this up a little bit, so that way the eggs don't turn into scrambled eggs. Let's see if I can get you closer. There you go. So the eggs don't turn into scrambled eggs. So as much as this was a hassle and I didn't really want to do this, this is really reminding me of the chocolate cake recipe where you add the boiling water in at the end. And I'm thinking this is gonna be a nice vanilla cake. Oh yeah. So we're putting that in for 25 minutes. Yeah. Your hot dogs are almost done. This is what baking 7 cakes is like with children. You get interrupted. Yeah. Kids get upset. They get hungry. They cry when you put them down. They try to run after an open oven. But you know, no one's gotten burnt except for me. So, it's all good. It's all good. She's tired. She's teething. Hey, you're home. Thank you. She's tired. She's teething. She's hungry. So, with snot in that kiss. Yeah, there was. Oh, look at you. Look at you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, can you wave? Can you wave? Can you wave? Yeah. But I'm really excited about that vanilla cake. We'll have to taste test and see how it goes. I know the strawberry cake tastes amazing. We now know that the chocolate cake tastes amazing because it got stuck to the bottom of the pan. So I'm pretty excited to see how this vanilla cake recipe goes. This might be my new vanilla cake recipe from here on out if it's that good. So yeah, stay tuned. We're getting there. So just give it a little taste. It's been there for like 10-15 minutes. They're not hot. They're warm, but they're not hot. All right, 1 left. Still haven't decided what I'm gonna do with that cake. We'll see. You think I'm funny because I'm asking you to clean up?
No. Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna let the top of this, because this is really, there's a lot of moisture in this cake, so we're gonna let that harden so we can flip it like that. Because yeah, that one's basically formed like a little layer. So we're gonna let it kind of create like a little, I'm gonna call it like a stale layer. I don't know. It's just so it doesn't stick. I have no more drying racks. I have 3. So I've got 2 round pans on 2 of them. That's for the vanilla. Here's the chocolate. I hope we have enough cake. The vanilla cake.
This is Dad's one. Give me a plate. Not yet. Mom,
That looks yummy.
please give it to me.
Can you guys please stop? Oh yeah, see? Just dry crumbs.
Stop touching.
So that's done. So we'll leave this to sit for like 10-15 minutes and then we'll get it onto a drying rack. Our cakes are all done. All right, last cake flip. Can we look how much that deflated after it cooled? It was like up over the pan. That's crazy. Oh, that was easy. Oven is officially off. Air conditioning's on, so we can sleep tonight. Because with the oven on this long, I feel like it was gonna get even hotter than it already was. But anyway, so these are just making the cakes. We still have to make all the frosting and assemble the cakes. So that is going to be like part 2 is making the, hang on. Part 2 is making the frosting. Part 3 will be cake assembly. So stay tuned.